Testing. Oh, here we go. Bum, 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 bum. Hello, viewer. Ask me anything. I mean it. Right. While I play around with Desmos. Copy of reflection. So many Desmos sheets. Agony of choice. Well, we have 4 views so far. Oh, hang on. There is a question. A question? I didn't know. I didn't expect any questions. Let me see. Howdy, Dino, says Gordon. I still pray with goal regularly to this day. Lovely. Very happy to hear it. Yeah. What was the whole Kickoff Revival experience like for you from start to finish? From start to finish. It was a very long. I mean, it's a big question. I did say ask me anything. The whole experience. So it started off back in about 2013 or so. I met Abriel, and he wanted to, help me make a game. And unlike various other people I have met, he actually did make something happen. Eventually, it took 2 attempts, and I got the deal for this game with the strategic content division at Sony. But this required a demo. So by the time we got to the, first attempt at doing this, I'd already spent my spare time, probably a year or 2. And then I had a demo, and the demo proved the basic concept of the game. The first time though we didn't manage to get a deal, but somehow we did the second time. So I was quite disappointed after, because of all that effort that was put in. And I don't know why. I don't know why it didn't happen, but it did happen the second time. And so at that point, then I was working at NHTV as a teacher still. So when that possibility arose, I took it and left my teaching job. And I spent about 2 years working on Kickoff Revival. Probably 1 year after I left, the thing was released, and then I continued working on it afterwards. Oh, the actual dates are getting a bit vague in my memory now. I think in the end it was about 2 years. And I was using Unity, and that was to become a problem. But the issue is that you get a contract with a company like Sony, and it's very interesting because the original contract proposal was one where there was a royalty share, and Sony didn't want that. They wanted just to give an advance, and then any royalties I could have all the royalties. And I remember when that happened, it was like my heart sank a little bit, because I knew what that meant. It meant I would never see any royalties, which is a common problem. But, the way I looked at it, they did advance the money. It did allow me to leave my job and work on this game. But I worked 90-hour weeks. And the thing is, it's not like working in a company. I was working by myself. So I had no IT department. I had no... we had a couple of programmers who joined, and so there was one animator who did some animations for the thing, and an artist, a 2D artist, and but it was all remote. I never met them, and so there I am working away, the old school way of working. And then I decided to stream the development, so I was doing that for quite a while. And if anybody following the stream will have seen things like my computer was cursed, and it so that was a lot of fun. I had that was a problem, yeah. So working 90-hour weeks. And it's actually quite difficult. It's easier to do the job when you have somebody telling you what to do. But when you have to make the decision and the call about what you do. I decided to stream the development for two main reasons. One was for publicity, because I was still clinging on to this idea of community like a complete buffoon, build up a following. It's like, you might as well just... Hardly anybody manages. We only ever see the people who get followers and get viewers and subscribers. We only ever see them because the algorithm pushes them in front of us. So we see them, and so then we think that you stand at any chance. You don't really. For every person who manages to build something, there's like 1,000 people for whom it didn't work. But you kind of still try to cling on. I was clinging on to the idea that community would work, all this other thing, just like all the other indie developers out there. So you stream for that. So that was one reason for streaming. The other one was also because otherwise it's a very lonely experience. I mean, could you imagine working 90-hour weeks in a room And you think, why do you need to work 90-hour weeks? Oh, because of the passion. And it's like, well, it's your fault. But, you know, when it's your own game. So it was a bit gruesome. But it was all going to be worthwhile, because in the end I was going to finally get my game out. And then what I found was that, you know, certain mistakes. A mistake was one that a company came along and said, oh, we'll do a physical release for your game, you know, and it's like publishers' eyes lit up, you know. It's like, again, you have to look at the reality of this. You will never get a single penny of royalty from that deal. So they'd had a deal for the release, and I don't think I ever saw a single penny of it, because there's always a way to figure out how you can offload that stuff and get a benefit from it in a way that you don't end up paying a royalty back to the developer. It's funny how that always manages to happen, and that's exactly what happened. Funny, because I saw my game, it was really weird. The sales of the physical copies of the game were allegedly quite small, you know, but I couldn't understand why they were being sold in. It was being sold in supermarkets. You could actually go into a supermarket and you see. I'm going, well, just someone explain. So who knows? Who knows what it is? Who knows the mystical ways of it? But anyway, the point is, it seemed like a good idea, but I really had a misgiving, because I knew that it would create a hard deadline. And it did create a hard deadline. But you see, I had a publisher, and I asked the publisher, is this negotiable in your mind, or do we have to do it? And the publisher said, no, we have to do it. So we did it. And so then that created a hard deadline. And so I went to ship the game on the hard deadline. But it's okay, you know, it's sort of like shipped. Everyone will understand, won't they? It's indie game development. The game is not very expensive at all, you know, and it's going to be updated, and it's designed to be played online anyway, you know. It's like, oh yeah, naive. Because it's almost like whenever you're doing a kind of endeavour like this, there are just a lot of people who are almost tripping over themselves to find out where you are wrong in some way. I think this is fairly normal. And if you actually have a following, that can compensate for it. But in this situation, there was no following. And there was just people who liked a game that I'd done 20 years previously. Or more. And but you think you do all of that, and you think, well, you know, I'm not starting from scratch. I've got people who like the stuff that I did. Surely that's it. Look, I'm streaming, and there are people interacting with me when I'm streaming, and we're getting all excited about these things. And yeah, right, that's it. So what happened was, because of the hard deadline, I had the day one ship thing was going to need a patch. I just couldn't do it. So, you know, that's what happened. And guess what? There was you get the thing, you could buy the physical medium, but what you were supposed to do was install the patch. Again, you know, naively, I'm thinking, well, people understand. You get the physical medium. Really, the physical medium is because people just want, so they keep saying, you know, oh, we just want to have something physical. Yeah, so okay, you get your physical thing, and you have to go update it, you know, so what's so wrong with that? But no. As soon as it was physical, it put in minds of certain people, maybe, I don't know why, but that was it. That was the finished thing. That was the deal, you know, that it's the thing you ship in the box, you know. Leave aside the fact that even companies with budgets of millions are not capable of shipping generally a completely bug-free game, and there's some good reasons for that, which I won't go into right now. So there I am by myself, and it was really just awful, because we could probably have got away with it, but guess what? The game hadn't been released yet, and it had already been reviewed, and the basis of the review was the physical copy, which should not have happened, because we told Sony is that it's not the release date yet. But in spite of this, it got reviewed a week before it was released, and by someone who was, not bought into what I was trying to do, not interested in really anything other than the opportunity to write a bad review. And so they wrote a bad review. And then this became the template for all the other reviews, because it was like, well, look at this terrible review for this game, eh? We just sort of take that, really change the words a little bit, stick it out there, That's Andy Harry, stick it in the oven, And so lost control of the narrative right from the very beginning. And the end result of all of this was, I felt after years of working on this and 90-hour weeks and shipping to a hard deadline, when I was able to ship something, you could play the game, ongoing, because the development was supposed to continue or be ongoing, which we kind of made clear on this, right? So, and it did until, the business couldn't carry on, because I needed to get a job, because it wasn't, no chance of it. In fact, probably even if I got good reviews, there probably wouldn't have been a chance for it now. Now I know what I know. And that's it. So my whole experience, Gordon, of, if you're still there, the whole experience of this from start to finish is one of trying to wrestle with the question of why the hell do I have, why have I developed the talents of game development and programming to quite a sophisticated degree, because that would not have happened. I would not have had the game would not have been successful in the way it was if I hadn't got that, talent, purpose in life, all that kind of stuff. And the question of just trying to understand that it was a good idea to try and bring out a game again, and answer the question, how would I have made Kickoff if I had modern hardware? And so I went into that. That's exactly what I did. And I made a game that some people loved so much they said it was worth a PlayStation 4 just for my game. But nobody heard that. All they heard, all you see, is the other story. And I was completely broken by that. And in the sense that I kind of learnt my lesson. There is no purpose. You don't learn how to do things with a purpose. Life doesn't have a purpose. Being a game developer doesn't have a purpose. And certainly making video games does not have a purpose. They are a plaything. And I think playthings are important, but they do not have a purpose. There's no purpose to it. And there's no purpose to anything else either. I suppose if I had become... It'd be easier. Let me put it this way. It might be easier with other things I could have devoted my life to feel purposeful. I could have devoted my life to... I could have been a doctor, for example. I mean, not for any reason, then it just could have been one of the many random things I could have been. I could have been if I had that, maybe my life would have felt like it had a purpose. I went into teaching after the attempts to release other football games that didn't even get released. I mean, at least Kickoff Revival got released. I mean, at least that got out there. That's a big plus compared with Soccer 2 and Soccer 3. But yeah, it actually got out there. But I could have been a doctor. I could have been a surgeon. I could have been almost any other business. And maybe I would have felt like I had a purpose in life. But instead, it was making video games. And by definition, they have no purpose. It's entertainment. And don't get me wrong, I think entertainment's important. But it doesn't have a purpose. And you can't work that way. I was looking for to make use of my purpose in life. So I got into teaching because I thought, well, I could find a purpose there. I could find something to do, something I could use all of the stuff that I'd learned, and I could pass it on to others, and it made me feel good, that idea. So I went into teaching and found that was really hard too. But one of the most difficult aspects of that was getting anybody to pay attention, frankly. But I know that I've changed some lives as a teacher. I also totally expect that I'll never get any thanks for it. And I doubt that may not even remember. But I know, and I sometimes see some people who are in the industry, they're doing well, and I remember them because I was their teacher, and I think, yeah, okay. They may not have liked me, but I know I did a good job. But that's it. You have a purpose. Great. But that in the end, I stuck that out for 8 years. But it became a bit of a thankless task. And there was that, get back into indie game development. So yeah, from start to finish, it was actually pretty awful. Yeah. I'm proud of what I've done. I did get some pleasure out of it. The maths I used for the goalkeeper. Yes, there's maths in the goalkeeper. It's quite interesting problem. But but yeah, overall, not really. But what it did was it did do something. It just was the next step on my journey, because that's all it is. It's a journey. What I tell you, I've just recounted that story, and I feel a bit ill now. It doesn't still sit well with me when I think back on that. And I have to remember, right, that the problem is all within me, because it's just the way I look at it. My problem is the attachment to the idea. This stupid idea that if you get good enough at something, you'll be able to devote your life to it. It can happen. I mean, devote your life to it in sort of your terms. It can happen, but really, I had to learn to devote my life to it on its terms. And so I am in the service of Lord knows what, and I have a journey, and it was an important part of the journey, as was teaching. One of the things that teaching did was sharpen my skills a huge amount. I learned how to I learned a lot about people. I learned a huge amount about human politics. Oh my gosh, go in education, you learn about politics and strange people in positions of power with certain characteristics, and falling into certain stereotypical roles within the group dynamics, and also just looking at all the students, so many different kinds of people, and you start picking up patterns and learning from them. So anyway, so I'll finish this off. So journey. Hi, Jeff. Journey. So that was important for building me up and getting skills as far as people goes. And then I had the opportunity to get out of education, which can be hard. So the game gave me that opportunity. And then, my partner and I wanted to move to the UK. So I made the move, and she stayed in the Netherlands for a while. That was all very difficult. But I made the move, and I started work at a company. And of course, because I'd been out in education for a while, I really started on a, not so great a situation, which is another story, But I very quickly remedied that. So I went into AAA development, in effect. Well, that's it. For a while, I spent some time with Make Real that was outside of AAA development, and then I've ended up back in there. That's where I am now for like over a year and a half at Splash Damage. And I feel that is fulfilling in the sense that I know I'm doing good things and things. I'm tackling problems that are difficult problems that many have tried to tackle in the industry, and I feel I'm getting somewhere. So that is, in the end, worthwhile. But nobody said life was going to be easy, right? It's not. It's like a video game. The trick is you have to learn to enjoy it, and that means you shouldn't take it too seriously. Anyway, Gordon, there we go. I think I've answered your question. If you're still with me. Jeff, Kickoff 2 is still my favourite football game. The hours I spent on that as a kid. Yeah. Good. Glad you were satisfied with your purchase. Did my students know they were being taught by a legend? Well, if some other people had given them a chance, maybe. But the problem was that I'm not. What's the word? Iconoclast? Is that the word? Sorry, I just need to check. An iconoclast. Hi there, Stu, 1985. And Canu, hi. I'm playing Kickoff 2 every day with my... Are you still playing it now? That's amazing. Wonderful. Right, iconoclast. It's a person who attacks or criticizes cherished beliefs or institutions, or the destroyer of images used in religious worship. But I think the first one is a person who attacks or criticizes cherished beliefs. I'm a bit of that. And there's nothing like being a teacher that is challenging students by you tearing down some of their beliefs. One of the problems that you get is that in education is the what is it, Cunning-Kruger, whatever it was, the effect, where before you learn something, you don't know how much you don't know, right? If you get my drift. And so I had a whale of a time at the beginning when I first started teaching, just dealing with students who thought they knew more than me. So it really didn't matter. In fact, there were some students would go around criticizing me because I had experience in assembly programming. So basically what you need to think about is all of that kind of toxicity that exists and you see in software engineering on the internet. You just go to Stack Overflow and you can see it. Someone asks a question, it's a perfectly good question, but because the people who manage Stack Overflow have really big egos and want to pretend like they know everything, and they don't understand the question, and because they don't understand the question, they say it's a bad question, right? When in fact the problem is that they aren't anything to do with that question. They're not going to answer the question because it's not their field, and it was a perfectly good question, right? But they go vote that down or just shut it off and whatever else. It drives me utterly nuts. That kind of toxicity that you get that's basically what it was like in 2007 onwards. In dealing with that, I felt like I was thrown into a real life crystallization of the internet, where the stuff that went on internet forums with flaming, that's an old term not used so much these days, is it? Was basically happening like in real life, backed up by a forum that the students would use. And so it really didn't matter. And I remember I had one colleague, I think as kind of a little bit tongue-in-cheek, I tried to remind people in a kind of nice way once about the fact that I'm considered a legend, right? By people say it to me, okay, sorry, it's embarrassing, but there you are, right? So I made some kind of little jokey thing. It was based around Kung Fu Panda. Legend tells of a legendary warrior made of the stuff of legend. And I just wrote this post out. I was pointing to something that someone had said about me that was nice, because nobody was saying anything much nice about me. So you will see why in a moment, maybe. But I had a colleague, and the first thing that they did was they replied. A colleague. He's like also a teacher. The first thing they did when they saw I had posted that was immediately respond to it and go, legend. Yes. Yeah. I've seen things. It's like, actually, I'll tell you another story. That guy, who shall remain nameless, but was utterly, oh my God, he really, really liked to pull me down a peg or two at any opportunity and for any reason. I remember I was playing snooker. There was a snooker hall nearby with a couple of students and him. And, I was talking to the students, were there, a couple of students, and it was like about who I am, as one does, I just made a remark, I'm more known for being a game designer than I am for a programmer. I made that point because I was there as a programming teacher, but I'm actually more known for my work as a designer than I am for my work as a programmer, right? And the damn guy, you know what he said? Without flinching, immediately said, "You're not a designer." That still hurts, because I'm like an elephant. I never forget these things. It's just like I couldn't believe it. It's like, what the hell do I need to do? I had won 2 fracking Golden Joystick Awards. You understand why I keep going on about them. It's like, hello? And this colleague, in front of the students, saying I wasn't a game designer. So there is a rather complicated answer to your question. Did my students know they were being taught by a legend? And I think overall, on balance, considering, the different aspects of this question, I think we'd have to say they were never allowed to. Maybe I should move on. Gordon, thanks. Fascinating answer. I'm gutted that you had a pretty bad experience overall. Glad there were positives after it. What are you doing musically at the moment? Well, musically, I'm trying to recover from a move. New place, which is good. Mainly what I'm doing musically is I'm learning musical instruments. That's my main thing. So the flute is coming along really well. I'm also transferring my songs off cassette tape. These cassette tapes that go back 30 years, nearly 35 years. I've transferred them off, and then I'm releasing them slowly. So you can see them on my YouTube. The other thing I'm trying to do is I've had problems with my producer for my singles. And you might have noticed I haven't released a single in 7 months, nearly 8 months now, since Christmas, and problems with various things. It's been a rough time the last few years in general, but basically I don't have producer anymore, and I've got to get them mixed again. So I'm trying myself to do that now then. So I'm working on My Child. Just to put it in perspective, I've had the video ready for My Child for about 2 years, and it's probably 3 years that we've been trying to get this damn thing out. And to be fair, I'm a bit fussy. I listened to the last one that we had, and it didn't feel right, and I've since added a couple of guitar parts, and then it is much better. But I needed those guitar parts mixed in, and it ain't happening, so I have to do it myself. So I've been working on that this weekend, and that's going quite well, and I'm pleased with how the thing is going. But it's a bit nerve-wracking because I'm fairly new to mixing, and the problem with mixing is it's a nightmare. You never know whether you got it right. But I'm learning, and I've got a good setup for listening here, and I'm also I'm just started today. We tried it. Burn a CD and pop it in the car. It has a CD player, and I can hear it in there as well. And it's like a good way to do. So anyway, there is a video, and I'm working on mixing the track, and it's a bit complicated because it's got bass, drums, 3 guitars, 3 violins, a piano, a mandolin, and probably something else I've forgotten. Oh, backing vocals, and the drum. And I have to redo all the drums because I don't have. The problem is I have the project, but I don't have all of the VSTs. I don't have all the plugins. So that's the problem, right? You can get your files from a person who's doing mixing for you, but unless you have all of his plugins or her plugins, unless you have them. So I'm just going to try and do it again. We'll see how it goes. So there is plenty happening with the music, but not publicly right now. Jeff is asking, there was a Player Manager remake on Android, but doesn't seem to be on iPhone. Were you involved in that? No, I wasn't involved in that, because that's the other thing that keeps cropping up with this, is that not only did I have a successful game that I failed to capitalize on to give me a kind of secure position as an independent game developer in the industry. Mind you, how many of them are there that actually manage to survive? I mean, go find them. At least I'm still in the industry in some capacity, right? NAAA. But well, where was I? But the other thing that's quite painful about this is that there's all and sundry seem to think that they have the rights to my games. Either because that's what people seem to do. There are people out there who downplay my involvement in my own game, which is a joke. There are people out there who claim to have the rights to my game when they don't. There are people who have actually publicly claimed ownership because they were contracted to do a port of the game that was even initiated without my permission, but that's another story, by the publisher. So so then what? So basically, what this means is in Italy there was some person who was one of those fan, love my game, I love your game so much, I'm going to rip it off. Yes, it's that one. It's absolutely wonderful, wonderful person. Yes, and what they do, it's like kind of like the Amber Heard of video games. It's like, so they absolutely love the game, and so they go and do a rip-off version of the game, and then because I made it clear, in order to maintain my moral rights, which they don't understand what moral rights are. I don't think they have really the intelligence to understand what moral rights are. But what moral rights actually are is the right to be associated with your own work and to not have your work messed about with so that it misrepresents your work. Right? If you write a book, for example, I couldn't take somebody's book and rewrite bits of it and then republish it. That would actually be against the law because of moral rights. Because what I'm doing is I'm changing the essence of the thing that somebody else was identified author of the work. So in order to make it clear that whatever these people were doing, that they shouldn't have been doing because I didn't give them permission to do it, right? So I make it perfectly clear I'm not involved with it. Thank you. Clarifying my moral rights. They got mad with me, and because they got mad with me, they not only were ripping off my game, but they were slagging me off. And when they're not only slagging me off, they were actively involved in, you could say, anti-publicity campaign against Kickoff Revival. Ha! You've got to love human beings, haven't you? And you've got to love fans. They wonderful, wonderful fans. Actually, there are wonderful fans. They're not all like that. But my heart tends to sink, I have to say, whenever anybody says to me, and if you pick up, if anybody's ever picked this up from me, why I get a little awkward and I can't seem to take a compliment, it's because there's a piece of me that just dies every time somebody says, I really loved your game. Because I generally find that the ones who really love my game and tell me that they love my game are about to do something that is not going to be very nice to me. It just seems to happen. It's weird. If I'm doing business with somebody and they start waxing lyrical about my games, I'm thinking, oh gosh, it's terrible, isn't it? I better check the thing again. Gordon, thanks. I've always enjoyed your music. Oh, thank you. It means more to me than the game, to be honest, at this point. What is your relationship like with Sensible Software, guys? Yes. Honestly, I think the only way that I've got, only way I can get around that right now, that topic comfortably, is by just saying that I believe that John Hare, right, is the Chuck Norris of video game design. So yeah, there we go. That's the end of the questions. Excellent. I wasn't expecting any questions. Oh, hang on. The Three Lions. Did you really enjoy the Three Lions? Well, I was involved in that game, but how much of my input actually made it into the final game may have been quite a bit. I don't know, but it was difficult. I was working as an employee, so I had no sort of real control over the end result. So, and I've never actually played the final game. But let's say that the major part of that game I was involved in while I was in America. But I didn't see it through to the end. There's another story there. Ricardo, how you doing? Did you use state machine pattern for player manager? Well, which part of the game do you mean? Because player managers are pretty big. There's a lot going on in there. So, Kickoff used a flat state machine. Hi there, Ilka. How you doing? You mean, well, right. Well, look, there were two kinds of AI in Player Manager. One of them was it's the actual, football game on the field, the action game. And then the other one is the managers when they're buying and selling players and so on. So in both cases, yeah, it's a state machine. The kickoff code went into Player Manager, and so Kickoff used a flat state machine where each state was an ID number, and I learned the difficulty of flat state machines because the thing about Kickoff is that it's complicated for a flat state machine. There are things I'm doing in Kickoff which don't fit comfortably even in modern games, because you've got things. Look, they put it this way: if you've ever played a football game where when the ball goes off the side, say for a throw-in or whatever, everybody just pops into place, right? This is it's because it's easier to do this, because you just reset the state of all the players and you don't have anything happening over time. But I hate that. I wanted to make the game, and the whole philosophy in the design of Kickoff is based around the idea that things are happening all the time, and you're not having things pop. The goalkeeper, a difficult one, is like the goalkeeper is diving, and while, for example, the goalkeeper is diving, and then while the goalkeeper is diving, the ball goes into the goal. So then you have, is a goal. All right, well, now we need to reset the positions of all the players. Simple way to do that is you just literally pop everybody where they need to go. If you do this naively, the ball crosses the line while the keeper is in the air, and boom, suddenly is standing upright again, because it just pops everybody over. So you put in then a delay. So when it goes in, let the play continue a little bit after. Then you need to remember to turn off the normal AI. Other the players will run into the ball after the goal and still keep trying to play. But you can work around it. But it starts getting complicated when you have all these things to work around. And the most common state that you want is a pause. So you'd have change. I'm doing this, and then let's tell you what. Here's an example. A player falls over, right, because he was injured. So he falls over. Boom. Play the animation. You have to wait till the animation is finished. And once the animation is finished, you might have it pause for 1 second, and then plays the get up animation. There's a pause. So you have to put lots of pauses in, right? Because otherwise people can't follow what is going on, right? Pause is natural. But if you have a flat state machine, then you have many pauses all over the place. And so that's how that was done. Every pause was a different state because of where it would have to go next after. And it was very clumsy, this flat state machine. So when I did goal, I decided to solve this problem, and I did it by using coroutines. Except I didn't know they were called coroutines. I just invented them because I was writing in assembler, so unconstrained by the limitations of C or the thinking of programming languages like C or C++, and certainly free of the stern expressions, virtual expressions of all those people who are ready to criticize you online. There wasn't the internet, it didn't exist. So I could do what I liked with a free conscience, and so I did. And what I did was I made a macro in assembler that implemented a coroutine in like a couple of lines. The principle of it's really, really simple and works really well in assembler. And so I used that. So I had a hierarchical finite state machine, therefore, in Goal. But the original one was flat. So I hope that answered your question. Ricardo, did you also use no, it was, well, it's not event system. It was more, I used an event system in Goal. And I used it in Kickoff Revival. I took it further. So I wrote my own coroutine system in Unity instead of using Unity's, because I needed to have message handling. So Unity's coroutine system doesn't allow for message handling, and that's, it's something I call proc. I used to teach it to the students who were receptive, let's put it that way. But it was one of the things in the AI course that I was teaching. So in theory, all the students who passed my AI course know about this. But the original Kickoff did not have an event system. It worked by polling instead. So, you think when the ball went out of play, it would set a flag. And so the flag says, I went out of play. Then there would be the AI for the referee. And the referee would check, has the ball gone out of play? And then it would, say, blow the whistle when that happened. But it was also checking to make sure, did it already go out of play? Did it hit the advertising and come back onto the pitch? Those little tricks that you want to try and, So the referee was basically listening to the ball. So in a sense, the ball was an AI and the referee was an AI. And then each team had a captain. So there was a captain AI. The captain AI was responsible for organising the players. And each player was an AI. And the goalkeeper was an AI. But you see, the ball was an AI too. And this is because there's really not, especially when you're dealing with states, there's not really much of a difference between AI and something dumb like a ball. It's a behaviour. When the ball goes out of play, it detects that and says, I'm out of play. And the referee can then check the context. It's polling, right? No message. It just keeps looking. What's the ball doing now? And it's tracking what it's doing. And what am I doing now? And one of the advantages of polling, a very strong advantage, is that the thing that is interested in certain events happening naturally only checks for it when it's executing its own code. So the referee is interested in whether or not the ball is in or out of play, and it copes with that because it checks every time. Right? And that's nice, because you're not going to get the ball sending a message to the referee, interrupting the referee. That's the problem with messages. If you're interrupting all the time. So the referee's busy doing what is on, and the ball says, "Oi, I've just come out," and the referee has to say, "Look, I already know. Actually, I don't care that you're out. Just go away." Now, you might think it not really that much of an issue, but when things start getting complicated, you then have to put in guards, because when you're responding to a message, if you have a thing, I'll give a classic example from something else, just to put because it's an easy one. Let's say that you are making a game where you can shoot an enemy. When you shoot the enemy, it plays a death animation with a soldier or whatever dies. Well, what happens? You could do this with a message. So when the message arrives, play the death animation. So it hits. That's nice, right? Bullet hits, and it goes, okay, great. But the problem is that there's a second bullet. So the first bullet hit, and then there's a second bullet. And then you're halfway through playing the animation, and the second bullet hits, and it restarts the animation. I know you may have even seen these types of bugs. It's really annoying. So what has to happen is they say, well, no, I'm now in the state of dying. In the state of dying, I don't care about bullets. But then you have someone comes along and says, but, that's a bit silly because after the first bullet, now the other bullets are not doing anything. And so then you need, well, maybe we turn on ragdoll, or I don't know. But yeah, you've got the bullets have a different meaning dependent on the state of the one that you're sending the message to. Who looks after that? So the AI entity has to look after managing these messages. When you think about it, it starts to become quite open to issues and problems. These go away when you use polling because it's only checking for the thing that it already knows it cares about. The disadvantage with polling is that it becomes very complicated. If you've got, basically every single state that you have would have to check, for example, for a collision with a bullet. And so this becomes unmanageable very quickly if you've got complicated states. So what you want is something that works in between. I've done many different possible solutions to this. But anyway, let me go back to the chat. I don't know if I answered the question or not. Random one. What are your views on the crazy polarity in US politics? Oh, it's the same view that I have for the crazy polarity in UK politics. There is no polarity. It's an illusion. You've got exactly the same thing happening in the UK, and it's happening all over the world, and it's a fake. It's like WWF. There is only one polarity, as in it's all right wing. That's the conclusion that you can only come to. That anything that isn't right wing is there as only a token. And I'm very concerned about it in the sense that it just feels like the whole world is shifting over into an extreme right-wing thing that will be completely devoid of any humanity. That is the thing there's no right or left anymore. It's like, are you a human being or are you a cog? And that is really what this is all about now. And the sophistication in the discourse that they convince cogs that they're not cogs, and they convince the people who are actually free, as in human, rather than a cog, that feel human rather than feel like a cog, they're turned into the demons. Think about it. It's something I talk about from time to time, the way in which positive language is used as an insult. Social justice warrior. Social, positive word. Justice, positive word. Warrior, positive. As in courage. You're representing courage, justice or fairness, and, human sociability. Social. There's social, society. In fact, social society. Right? But that was and that's out of fashion now. Now we've got woke. Go around woke. So you can see this because it's all the same. It's like there's a pattern. It's like anybody going on about woke is more than likely also to be a Brexiteer in the UK, is also likely to be a climate denier, climate change denier. It seems to hang around together, these concepts. So what we have is a polarity, is not left or right anymore, but is individualism and humanity versus the other thing, which is conformism, and shall we say, I'll call it, for want of something better, mechanistic thinking, rhetoric. So there's a guy, James, I've forgotten his name now, it was on LBC, James something or other, I've forgotten his surname, but he takes calls from people who are complaining about woke, and he just asks them, what does it mean? and none of them can tell him. They all come back and say, well, you know, well, you know, well, you know. But no, they can't. It's the scariest thing ever. They cannot say what it is that they are complaining about. They've just been programmed to complain about a thing called woke when they don't even know what woke actually means. It's just a feeling. And that is social conditioning right there, isn't it? You can't, that's not conspiracy theory. It's like no tin hat here. It's just literally, if you've got people who are waging a war, metaphorically for the moment, against a concept such as woke, and they can't even say what it is. So that is the dark side. Whereas the non-dark side is where people are going around, going, well, I suppose there are other people other than me in the world. I need to think about their feelings too, or how they would feel about things. How people, might feel if they were a minority, or my choice of my language. Okay, if I use certain language, people will feel upset. I need to take that into account as a human being, that if I use language that upsets people, I need to be accountable for that. That is respect, is taking due account of other people's feelings. It's fundamental to being human, humane. But we're getting to the point where if I talk about how, when we use language that upsets a certain group of people or whatever, if we turn around and say that's their fault for getting upset, that's bullying. That's literally what bullying is. It's like when somebody says, ow, that hurt, and people just go, oh, that didn't hurt. It's like another Amber Heard situation there, isn't it? If you know what I mean. It's a kind of form of gaslighting. It's a form of, I don't know. It's bad. It's really, really bad to not have due considerations for the thoughts, feelings, and needs of others. That's what respect is. That is the battle here. And why? Why is that battle? Why does it exist? What's there to be gained by having a selfish society? Is that a selfish society is easier to control. And this is an old one. Again, this is not tinfoil. You just go and look at history. This has been used for centuries, for 2,000 years, as far back as we can go. The fear that's used to ensure that a population stays selfish so that they're easier to control. It's been, think of the religions, especially the Catholic religion or Christian religion has certainly done its share of that, is use fear. That was the fear back then, before TV, before media. That's the fear, the fear of God. Now we have the fear of other things. The fear of woke. Oh, man. I'll just go back to the chat. That's it. Was it hard creating new things back when there was no internet? I think it was easier to create new things back when there wasn't internet. It was so much easier. Oh. You know why? Because you didn't know if you were copying anybody. Now it's like, but it's a funny thing. Now, I don't know. I suppose it's easier to know if you found something original. But do you really want to know? This comes back to the whole thing of what the purpose is of stuff. It's like, yeah, now you think, hang on, has anybody ever had this thought before? And you go and you start Googling it, and you might find that you're fairly close to being original. And that happens with me. I've got a kind of nose, if you will. It's a talent. And if you think about it, it's applied to everything that I've done, like with my games and so on. And I'm not saying this as a show off, it's just like it is one of the skills that I've got, or talents that I've got, is being able to find the road less travelled. So that's how I was able to create innovations with, my football games, for example. And so the point with the road less travelled, which is the name of a book, actually, but that isn't really the context I'm using this in here, is that it's being able to find or feel for areas that are not very well explored. So, for example, the video that I put up on my channel that some people really didn't like, and I even got accused for being a flat earther when I hadn't made any statement but just merely asked the question. That by the way, that's the dark side of the politics, right? It's like you're not allowed to question anything, you see, but not allowed to even ask the question, right? But that's with the moon, right, is being lit from above after the sun is set. So got the which way round would this go? Yes, it'll be like this. So there's the moon like that, and the sun would have to be sort of over here. Oh, can I? Oh gosh, because this is not mirrored. As the sun sets, you'd expect the kind of the shape of the moon, crescent of the moon, to follow. But what we had was, and it was taken at 9:15 at the time that the sun set. So the sun is sort of, over here. The sun has set, so it's below the horizon, but the moon is pointing upwards. And I had tried looking for this before, but I didn't know what term to use. And it is there, it does exist. It's called the moon terminator illusion, which someone, I think Wagyu, on the channel, he was good enough to point me in that direction. So that allowed me to find some more material on it, but it's not very well studied, let's put it that way. And I don't agree with any of the documentation on it yet, because it can't answer a fundamental question, which is, for me, right, I really just want the answer, right, is that if the sun has set below the horizon and it's pointing up like this, logically, when you look at it with your eyes, you have to see that there needs to be a curve between the sun and the moon to explain this. It would have to be sort of curving like this. So then the question would be, where does that curve come from? I don't know the answer. I had a theory, but it doesn't match up. I thought it was to do with atmospheric distortion, but that doesn't seem to match up. And you see some explanations which are to do with foreshortening, but that does not make sense to me, because if you were to imagine that I'm physically in the same place, well, the camera and that video is in the same place, the moon is in the same place, and the sun is in the same place, and we just get rid of the sky and the atmosphere and the planet, so that we're all floating in space and have not physically moved, would we still expect to see that the light hitting the moon would still not be showing the proper direction of the sun? And I cannot, maybe, but my problem is, I cannot see how, if we were floating in space, we would ever think that the moon, that it would be anything other than a straight line. It would have to be a straight line. And I still can't quite figure that out. But I use that as an example of something that is a little less, let's say, explored. So the internet makes it really good for finding out, if you have an idea, if somebody's thought about the idea before. But I found that the other side of this doesn't really seem to matter. It's like you don't get polluted. At least I don't get polluted by other people's thoughts in order for coming up with an original idea. It might be that that's a talent that not everyone has. I don't know, but it's like, okay, I know what's there. There, I can avoid. So maybe it makes it overall easier, I think, instead of harder. It makes it easier because you get more information about what other people already know, and you have a way of checking to see if your idea is in some way original. So there we go. That was a bit more detail than probably you wanted, but was it hard? Right. Would it be nice? Would it be? This is from Ricardo. Would it be nice have some traces of these old pattern you made? I'm not sure. Maybe you could clarify that. But I didn't understand that question. Sorry. If you have another go, I really struggled with precise collisions in Unity. Yes. Yes, you will struggle with precise collisions in Unity. You will, because Unity relies on. Oh, I didn't get you started here again. Ultimately, because we don't put the right kinds of people in the roles where they're building this kind of technology, or let's put it this, maybe we do, but maybe the goals, maybe it's a bit of that, the experience of the people who do it, but also the requirements that are being set. So physics, sorry, I'm correcting my thoughts on it. Physics is the physics engine inside of Unity. The purpose of physics is to show off Nvidia hardware. So it doesn't care about the needs of video games. I'll say that again. They don't care about the needs of video games. All they care about is showing off their hardware. So the physics engine is designed for a certain kind of physics. It's the physics that is flashy, not physics that is precise. But of course, as game designers and developers, what we want, especially if we want to have determinism, that is, that your game always behaves the same from the same conditions, will always behave the same way. Non-determinacy in physics engines is a very common problem, and it's actually not that hard, not that easy to solve. In part, it's caused by the fact that, especially where you have a multi-threaded or multi-cored solution to physics, which is the whole point of Nvidia's approach, because they want to sell silicon, it means that you have multiple threads going on, which potentially will cause the sequence or order in which instructions are being executed for processing the physics in your scene in a different order. In effect, it's a randomization, and that can cause very slight differences in the behavior of the physics. So this is the first thing. The second thing is that the type of flashy physics that physics is designed for is be able to have a very large number of dumb objects with dumb collisions, like a brick wall that you hit and it goes boom, and everybody goes, oh, look at that, particles, and but that, ragdoll physics and all the usual kind of stuff, right? But that doesn't require either any kind of precision. So it's basically, it's pretty ropey. When I try to do a football in the football game, in Unity. I started off by trying to use the physics engine, and in the end I ditched it. So I use custom physics because it's not up to the task. It just isn't. A ball can be travelling at 50 meters per second, if I remember rightly. It can move pretty fast. And I need to have it collide with a 4-inch square post. So basically the thing is jumping forward like over a meter or a meter steps between frames at full velocity. And somewhere in this meter there's a post. You ain't going to get that kind of thing. Even if you turn on continuous collisions, it will not work. It doesn't have that precision. You're never going to get anywhere. Another problem is, even if you turn on those collisions, I just sort of like to have an example. This was a real problem that I witnessed. Is that I'd have the ball, I'm having to do this sort of mirrored, I would have the ball, bear with me a moment, can I change this? Let's see, transform, we're going to flip horizontal. See, now I look weird to you now, but I don't look weird to me now, so it's actually got mirror now. Okay, so what would happen is this ball would come down and here, next frame here, next frame underneath. Okay, so you've turned on continuous collision, so it should be able to figure out the point where it collided with the ground. But do you think it properly applies conservation of energy and appropriate rotation as the ball hits the ground? It should spin. No, it doesn't do any of that. It just breaks, even with continuous collisions. And it might be to do with certain optimizations, like continuous collisions may only work up to a certain kind of step. I don't know, but however it is, disaster. You want to do the kind of collision that you need for a football game. You have to write your own physics engine, in effect. So that's what I did with Kickoff Revival. There are some videos on my YouTube of me before Kickoff Revival was ever announced. I'm working on this thing and doing tests for having this ball do perfect collisions with the posts from scratch, just to try and get around this. There we go. Hey, Mike Garcia, how you doing? So it doesn't surprise me that you struggled with collisions in Unity. You will. You need your own physics engine. Ricardo, the said polling from where? A central queue? No, when I'm using polling, I tend to just have it that... Well, actually, these days I use a pattern called... well, I invented the pattern as far as I know, and I will say I invented this pattern until such time as somebody can tell me, oh no, this other person did it before. But or more commonly, someone comes along and thinks that somebody has already done it because they missed the point about what it is that I'm actually doing. But anyway, grumpy old person as I get older. I call it the notice board pattern, and the way it works is right, and it works really, really well. It's like a global variable or global flag. So if you imagine that the ball goes... Oh, actually, let's use the bullet example. So you're dealing with a problem of the bullet hits a player or a character and he plays the death animation. How are you going to solve that? Different ways of solving that. So one way is that the bullet polls every frame, checks for collisions against any of the players. So that's fine. But then once it actually has a collision, it needs to communicate to that player that it's hit that particular player. How are you going to do that? Well, the natural way that people will do that, as the first port of call these days, is to either have a message or a function. So you call your object-oriented disaster world, you might have a function that you call on the player or character that you just hit to say, take a bullet. All right. And so that's being called directly by the bullet. I really hate that, because the bullet is this thing that just needs to know of the existence of... See, bullet shouldn't need to know about the existence of players. I don't like that dependency. It creates a bind, and it means that then the bullet needs to be aware of every possible thing that it could possibly collide with. So, okay, the other way you can do this is with a message or a virtual function. What's the difference? Well, that's another story. I suppose with a message you put it in a queue. Well, that can have all kinds of problems, like in terms of delay, between when the thing should happen and when it does or whatever. But you know what? Another thing that you could do is you simply have a kind of general dispatch thing, a message. You send a message to the object and say, you've been hit. And now the object needs to respond to that in some way. So what's it going to do? It's busy executing some other code. Does it stop the code that it's doing? You've written this in Unity. You're using coroutines for that thing. You've just hit it with a bullet. You have to stop the coroutine that it was running in order to do something else. Unity doesn't provide that. So there's a way. You could, inside the loop of the current coroutine, you could put a check to see, have I been hit? This is another common pattern. Have I been hit? But then, of course, it would have to have that sort of, okay, maybe make a call. Is there a message for me? And the way you're putting the message handler, now you have to have the message handler in the different parts of... It's a nightmare. So you can try sending a message, or you can use the notice board. And so the pattern would go like this. Bullet hits player. A bullet posts a message on a big notice board and say, entity 375 has been hit by me, a bullet. And you slap it on the notice board. And so the bullet's job is all done. You see, this is the beauty of this pattern. And I use this all the time now for all kinds of things. It's a beautiful pattern because the bullet really doesn't care. Its job is done. You see, they call it the separation of concerns in programming, very common thing. You have different concerns are separated from each other. See, in the scenario that we had before, where the bullet sends a message, there isn't a separation of concerns, because the bullet needs to be aware of the thing it's sending a message to. In fact, the bullet is also a message service. So you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute. This other pattern is simply the bullet posts a message. I collided with this. Ta-da! And it gets on with what it needs to do next, which is either, terminate because it hit something, or if you want to get fancy, could travel through that and maybe collide with something else. Hey, you can do that because all it just needs to do is post the message up. Now, the interesting thing there is what happens to the message? Well, that's up to the thing that is interested in it. So a player or character that could get hit, or thing that could get hit by a bullet, just needs to look at the notice board and say, have I got a notice? Is there a notice for me? Have I been hit? And still that's polling. But at least you've got the separation between the bullet and the thing being hit, and it is polling. So that's actually no different than a kind of glorified global variable, you can say. But then this is the bit where it becomes truly useful, is that what you want to do is be able to choose whether you poll or whether you get a message. This means that you want to have the method by which some entity responds to a notice is up to that entity. It can choose to do it by polling. It can choose to do it by receiving a message. If it wants to receive a message, it just tells the notice board that it's interested in that. When it gets a message of this type, for it, when there's a message for me, says the entity to the notice board, please send me the message. Or alternatively, the thing can simply keep looking for itself. You can poll or you can use a message. And if you are using a message, the beauty is the message comes from the notice board, always from the same thing. And if there is any policy on notification, that could be brokered between the entity that needs to receive the message and the notice board. You're not talking to the bullet. You're not saying, bullet, you need to remember not to send me a message if I already have received a message from you. I do not need 2 hits from you, see. And that's just nonsense, because the bullet shouldn't really need to care about that. So what you have here is bullet, notice board, and the receiver of the notice that can receive that notice on its own terms. And the bullet doesn't need to know anything about the thing that it is hitting. That's the notice board pattern. And that's what, I use these days. And I could go on and on about it, because there are so many different ways that this is awesome. But I'll go on to the next question. Thanks for all the questions, by the way. It's really, I just on a whim did this, and I thought there wouldn't be anybody asking any questions. So lots of good questions, I have to say. Where am I up to now? Okay, World Wildlife Federation. Yes, well, it's not all extinct yet. But it was World Wrestling Federation, but is it now the World Wrestling Enthusiasm? I don't know what E stands for. I don't care, actually. It's just what I mean by WW whatever is fake. Thanks for sharing. Still playing Player Manager. Well, that's good. I would love to make a sequel to Player Manager still, but I don't think it'll ever happen. Hi, Quan. I don't know how to pronounce your name. But the sun isn't moving when it sets. We are rotating away from the sun's light. The moon is getting its own reflection of light from the sun, which is what we see. Yes, it is. But everything is moving very slowly compared to the speed of light. So, I say again, if we were floating in space, what you would have is a 3D view. I actually set this up in Unity, believe it or not. What you do is you'd have a ball, right, and a light source, and you would look at the ball and see how it's lit and be able to mentally draw a straight line from that to where the sun is. It would never disagree in space. I can't see how it would ever. I cannot imagine a way where if we got rid of all of the other reference points, such as the horizon or the sky or whatever it is, you just got rid of all of that, how we would end up with a curve. I cannot see how you would end up with a curve. There are some possibilities about having some kind of curve due to lens distortion, but so yes, and you can actually have that effect, right? If you were to take, this is what makes it so crazy, you can simulate this effect by using lens distortion, and then you say, look, but you see, the thing is that lens distortion only happens on cameras. The particular distortion that is often what you see is one of the least understood distortions. This is another road less travelled, and I've had arguments with people on this. I actually it was in severe disagreement with a colleague who actually was a nice colleague, but severe disagreement on this particular form of distortion. The particular one I'm talking about is where you, in a 3D engine, right, the projection onto the screen makes an assumption about where your eye is. It's doing a projection as if your eye is a certain position in front of the screen. And to know what that is, if your field of view is 90 degrees to the edge of the screen, in fact, here, edge of screen, there we go. I'm still mirrored, which is handy here. I'm trying to coordinate the two fingers. There we go. So from that to there, you can see that you've got, that is the field of view on this camera. Rather, let me turn this around. That is the field of view for me looking at myself. Right. So the point is, sorry, it gets difficult now. Which way? What are you looking at? Am I looking at you? You looking at me? I know. Anyway, look, the point is, if you could imagine the frustrum, the frustration, yeah. If you've got the frustrum there, there is a certain distance that my nose is from the screen, and to be able to view a 3D projection perfectly correctly, you need to literally put your eye there, and that is very rarely the case. So if you're looking at a game with a 90 degree plus or minus 45 degrees, you would need to get to the edge of the screen something that goes at 90 degrees, and then you put your eye right there so that you have that 90 degree right, you do that, and then you would have perfect non-distortion, which means that almost always the view that we get in video games and so on, they are, and also in film, is distorted, but we just get used to it. And also in certain direction, that distortion is minimal. But when you get a wide angle lens, you see, with a wide angle lens, very wide field of view, you would need to put your nose practically touching the screen. And so there's a really big disagreement between the two. And so when you look at this from a different point of view, you get curves and you start to see a distortion because of that. Anyway, the point about all of this is that doesn't happen with your eyes, because you don't get that kind of distortion with our eyes, because there is only one viewpoint. There's not two. There isn't one that the projection of the 2D image and then your eye. You've only got your eye, and so that distortion will never happen. So again, it would need to be a straight line. I can't see how it can't. And so that's the thing that is driving me a little nuts actually at the moment, because I can't really, I want to eventually find an answer that I'm satisfied with, that explains how clearly they aren't in agreement, so that it would have to be a curve. But then tell me how, if we just got rid of the planet and we got rid of the Earth, the planet, we got rid of the atmosphere and we were just floating in space, why we would still see the curve. And so if the curve only exists when we have on the planet, it's either the atmosphere or something else, or I'm just wrong, but I need to understand why. And nobody can explain it. You go and look at the explanations on Wikipedia, they don't make sense. Anyway, you're welcome, Ilka. I don't know how to pronounce your name. That probably got a weird I, so maybe that isn't correct, but my apologies. What is that the reason I changed the engine, the Unreal Engine changed its physics engine to chaos physics? Yes, I think so. Although I don't know what their decisions were, but they were using physics. And all I can say is, you know, if you want to do, if you need any precision and you need to have reproducibility, you can't use physics. It's not what it's designed for, to be fair, because as I said, it's only designed for selling silicon. It's not designed for making games. Ooh, bite me. Yeah. Let's see. So, yeah, Garcia, how you doing? What did you think of Ouya? Ouya. Ouya. Is that a warning or what? Ouya. It should have been a great idea. What is not very well known at all, because I haven't told anybody, is that back in 2000, I think 1987, 2007/8, I was actually pitching while I was at NHTV, and I immediately stopped as soon as I could see I wasn't going to get anywhere. But I did actually start pitching the idea of a console, an independent game console. So the funny thing is that this was before Ouya and before even the App Store. I didn't know that was about to come down the line, but I knew the need for it. So I sort of preempted it, and unfortunately nobody else could see it. And I would talk zero interest. Oh, those people! If they had just oh, hang on, could have beaten Apple at their own game. But because I felt the need for this independent console. Why? Because we need something that is more sustainable and sort of consistent and so on than PC, which is just a nightmare, and having to deal with all the different configurations, graphics cards and all the rest of it. Piracy is also an issue. So what's one of the things that consoles give you is anti-piracy, in effect. But anyway, so Ouya. The reason why Ouya, who contributed to the I don't believe people not believing in crowdfunding anymore as well. I mean, there was another one actually. Was the Game Stick? Do you remember? I actually got an original Game Stick. I supported the Game Stick, and I wanted to see if I could make a game on it. And the first thing I did on the Game Stick was check out VSync. It's the first thing you do on a console, because in the road less travelled, that only people who really know what they're doing sort out VSync. And guess what? The Game Stick didn't have VSync. And it was a hardware limitation, and so I never made a game for the Game Stick. Of course, like a troublemaker, I did raise this issue. I never tried the Ouya. I wonder if it had VSync. But when I raised the issue with GameStick, the reply came from their lead, I don't know, it was lead engineer, some engineer person there, who was basically saying, you don't need it because human perception doesn't happen faster than 1/10 of a second. And I was like, oh boy. Someone hadn't been paying attention in some class where some teacher had been teaching something rather important. I know, nothing to do with me. But, wow. Really? But Ouya, right. So, anyway, I digress. A question. Ouya. There's only one reason, and one reason only, that Ouya got all of its money that it got. One reason. And it's because it sold itself on the idea of free games. That's it. So what I think of Ouya is it was just another example of someone coming along and wanting to exploit our industry. Yes, the creative side of our industry. Exploit it again. Exploit it where those creative people in our industry really struggle to earn a frickin' living. We struggle to earn a living unless we lose our independence and go into AAA game development and so on, as I have done. And I'm quite happy because I'm done with the other thing. I'm done living the lotteries. The whole premise of Ouya was that promise of free games, because what matters is the console, you see. The games are just free. They don't take any effort or work. It reminds me a bit of the whole thing with the question of piracy, right? And how people who sort of advocated piracy, which are generally people who were doing piracy, if you know what I mean, they would basically say, oh, you know, I've kind of lost track. It was on the question of piracy. Whatever I was saying, it's gone. Doesn't matter. Anyway, the point is that with Ouya, that was a lie. In this sense, I mean it. That it was not sustainable, because you can't have the games created for nothing. They don't come out of nowhere. So it was real shame. You know, and it was unsustainable for that reason. What really needed to happen is right from the beginning, you know, actually wouldn't happen, would it? Oh, I remember what I was going to say, because it connected. So what I was going to say is the piracy thing, but the funny thing is people saying, well, people can't afford the games. But the funny thing is they can afford the computers and they can afford the peripherals. So what independent game development and to like great extent piracy, where game development where piracy is available, right, is actually doing is generating revenue for the hardware manufacturers. That was my point. So, you know, we're all there busy making the games and get nothing. But the people making the hardware, oh, they're rolling in it. And what needed to happen with Ouya to make it actually work is this rather strange idea. Strange idea. It's a strange idea that actually what we need is people investing in the games as well as the hardware. If they had done Ouya, where the proposition was to get the hardware but also put together a team, a curated set of game developers who would be delivering new content for the console, and that crowdfunding effort was going to not only go towards the hardware but also towards the development of the games, then they would have been in a good place. But that's always the secondary thing, isn't it, with indie game development? People don't think about the fact that we actually need to invest in the people that make the games. Oh, this could turn into a rant. Hey, Tony, how you doing? Yeah, Tony's a real fan of Kickoff Revival. Tony is one of my biggest fans, and he's responsible for a significant percentage of all Kickoff Revival sales. I'm joking. It has sold quite a bit more than 10 copies. Or 4 copies. But he bought KOR 4 times. Oh man. All right. Which question am I at now? That was the Ouya. The forward players with highest ability are the ones making more goals. The forward players with the highest ability are the ones making more goals. The algorithm behind that? Oh, I can tell you how the shooting stat works, if you like. I used to teach this in my AI course. You can always hear me dripping sarcasm when I talk about this. It's because I can remember all of the snarky comments that any students ever made. And I remember who made them too. And I just hope they're watching so I can say, see? I'm terrible, aren't I? So the way that worked is what you want to do is you want to have an attribute that if I'm going back to kickoff, is how I do it now. We'll probably kickoff. I was inspired by D&D. So, when you're rolling stats in D&D, use a 3d6, which gives you a number between 3 and 18. But because you're adding together dice, something called the central limit theorem comes into play, where the more dice that you add together, the more random numbers you add together, the more of a normal distribution that you get. So which means that with the normal distribution, mostly you get the center. And it's basically how big the peak is. If you're a really good footballer, right, with really good aim, you will still have a variation, but your curve will look like this. And if you're a bad one, your curve will look like this. Right? And the thing is, in both cases, the highest probability is the direction that you're aiming for. It's just that there's a lot of options when you're bad, and when you're good, the options are in effect a lot narrower because you have more of a peak like this. And so that's why I would convert it in effect into an angle by some mechanism. I think with kickoff, it was only shooting in 8 directions, so I basically set it up for each direction with some kind of offset. So you have the direction that he's going to shoot in, and then you have a normal distribution, which is adding together a bunch of random numbers, and then use that for the deviation that you get. And so in this way, if the player is a really good aim, is a really good striker, is more likely to get in the direction he wants. If he's really bad, he's going a bit all over the place. So there you go. Next one. I had to drop off for 20 minutes just listening to your random politics answer. Very enlightening perspective. Another random one. What's your proudest achievement? I don't know. That comes to measuring. I can't answer that question because it's like, what? Oh, I can't answer that without some kind of measure. And measuring, I've talked about that before. Measuring just spoils things. So if I go chronologically backwards, something I was pretty proud of recently is that I set up at work. I set up a symposium for engineering. And I'm still employed. There really was no danger. There was no danger of that. But it went well. It went well, I felt. And given that I hadn't really ever done anything quite like that before, and the personal stress that trying to do such a thing, It also involved public speaking, which I can do, but it doesn't make it any easier. I think that was pretty proud of that. I got through it. But some of the stuff I'm doing right now, I'm trying to tackle big issues that face the industry, as a whole. I often use that to sort of soften it when I'm talking about challenges that I'm facing any company I'm working at, and I say, well, this isn't just a problem. This is a problem throughout our industry, and a lot of it has to do with communication with engineers, and this is a big focus of what I'm looking at right now. The fact that I'm trying to tackle such a difficult problem, and I feel maybe getting somewhere, that I'm quite proud of, but I can't really answer the question otherwise. It's just load question, that one. You are pretty close to original pronunciations, so don't worry about it. Thank you, Ilka. That gives me an idea of how long. I mean, geez, feels like 7 hours ago. That. What is my favourite movie and why? Okay, well, without a shadow of a doubt, my favourite movie is Kung Fu Panda. Overall, yeah. Kung Fu Panda. That there is that's one of those movies that was supposed you'd think it was made for children, and certainly children can enjoy it, but it's actually got an awful lot to it, and it has some sublime quotes that I've actually used to comfort myself with from time to time, and I am known to quote from Kung Fu Panda. As I already did, I said, legend tells of a legendary warrior. That's literally how it begins. The movie right from the start. That's it. I can tell you the secret ingredient to my secret ingredient soup. Nothing. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, Kung Fu Panda. Beautiful, beautiful movie. I'd be interested to see what people think, if that was what they expected. But there we go. No doubt there are other movies too, but you said that. That was the one that came to mind. That's the one I said, Game Stick, cool. I got Mad Cat's Mojo. What's that? Mad Cat, I'm not familiar with that. Hey, Tony. So Tony comes into the conversation. So I have no idea. I've got a question for you, Tony. Why do you keep saying hard? You just do it all the time. And I always take it as meaning, something is being done that is difficult. But, I'm just wondering. I've been meaning to ask you for a while. Anyway. And so now we have Zag. Okay. Zag and Garcia are chatting. Let's have a look. And you, good. What are we talking about? Dino and Dini. Oh, right, there is a question from Ilka. Do you think Xbox Game Pass service will affect game development? I'm afraid that it will impact games quality in a bad way to produce more games and populate the number of games on the service. So let me just check what they're doing. I've read something about this recently. It's all very predictable. What are they doing? News. So I don't know what the terms are on this, but in general, it's just going to be bad for independent game development because it almost always is. Ever since Sony released the PlayStation in the mid-90s, well, back then, if you wanted to release on PlayStation, you had to, be big. I mean, I actually approached Sony about possibly doing a football game for their console in the mid-90s, and they told me to get lost. So what happened with it was that it started off like that. It required like £20,000 in order to get a dev kit. It was impossible. And of course you could put your own money in to get your dev kit, and there was no guarantee that they would even allow you to publish the game. And unfortunately they set a certain tone, and that tone has sort of stayed ever since. what you now have is there are two kinds of game development thing going on. You have I would call it AAA development, and then you also have independent development. But the reason why I think Sony and Microsoft and so on go for the Ponzi scheme feeling thing, where roll up, you're an independent game developer, hi diddly dee, game developer's life for me. If you know that film, you know what I mean. And the problem is that that whole model where you make a game and you pay for making the game yourself, you put it onto the platform and you take a shot at it and they give you royalties or payments from whatever, but they didn't invest in the game at all. Why do they do that? And ultimately, I think they do that because it draws people to their platform. So let's take Steam, for example. 90% of the revenue on Steam comes from the top 10 games. So why do they even need all the other games? Think about it. If 90% of the revenue comes from the top 10 games, I don't really need anything other than the top 10 games. So in the last years that the figures were available, a few years ago now, maybe there are new figures available, but I haven't checked. There were 7,000 games released, in 2 consecutive years, 14,000 games released over 2 years. I think that's just stupidly large number of games. Why do they support that? Well, here's the reality. Almost all of those games will lose money or not make back their development costs. And the platform holder profits from all that loss. This is the way that it's been since forever. Because if you think about it, if you have 1,000 game developers and they release 1,000 games and none of those games make any profit, but they do sell, they just don't sell enough that you can get a profit from it, right? Or recoup the development costs. They've all made a loss, but they've provided something that brings people to the platform, and the platform profits from it. So what it is they're working for Steam for free. It's free. You can think of it as free labor, free R&D, because one of those games might actually become successful, right? It's possible. But then if one of 1,000 games is successful, then you've got 1,000 research and development projects for free to have the one game that creates the revenue for the platform. So this is why it makes no sense from a kind of business point of view. It's a nightmare. Why? That's why I liken it to a Ponzi scheme. Maybe it's not the best analogy, but it's that kind of idea. So this is why I believe these platforms keep the indie thing there. They do it to bring people to their platform, but really they don't have any need to look after them. So with these passes, you just know how it's going to happen. In the end, people, the game developers are going to get, as it always is, they're not going to get anything back. I don't know how with things like Game Pass it works anyway. It's like, how is the revenue shared, or do you just? I don't know. I mean, I know that if you, and then you can have the problem that if the platform holder actually does invest in some games, then they have absolutely no incentive to ever let any of the games that they invested money ever recoup the advance, because the moment that they've recouped the advance, then within the ecosystem, the platform holder has to start paying royalties. So that's the other thing as well. So what you will have is, in a sea of so much content, the platform holder has zero incentive to allow any of them to sort of go above a certain threshold if they invested money in them. But I mean, that may have been the case before. I don't think any investment goes on these days. So we've had the indie apocalypse, right? I mean, indie apocalypse, as which was on the cards. I think indie's just dead now. And don't forget as well that when you make a game for a platform, you have no control over the future of that game. So people who've developed games for Android are going to delist games that haven't been updated for a while. Oh my gosh. Why? Why? Because they don't care about your content. They only care about their platform. So what this means is that if you made a game that was finished, right, and you want to, it'd be like, it would be like if you were an author of a book and you had your book published, but in order to keep it on the market, you have to keep updating it. And the thing is, updating it means then everybody has to keep their development environments available, and updating is okay. Well, we have to rebuild the thing on the latest version of SDKs and whatever else, otherwise they won't be able to go there. That's it. And then you were unlucky enough to be using Unity, and guess what? If you want to use the latest version of the SDK, you'll need to upgrade your version of Unity. Okay, except the version of Unity deprecated some feature that you used in your game. And then what do? So, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. We desperately, for independent game development, we desperately need an independent platform. We need an independent platform for independent game development, whose purpose is not to try and suck money out of the whole system. Its purpose is not purely financial, but is also to do with the creative spirit of video game development. And we really need that. We need a way for people who have shown that they can make video games to be able to make video games without either having to go into AAA or having to take a lottery. Okay. His games won 2 golden joysticks. That's true. 2 years in a row. I feel like on that one, I feel like on Big Bang Theory, was it Buzz Aldrin? Wasn't it? They're saying, I've been to the moon. I won 2 joystick awards. I beat off all the AAA game developers of the time by myself. Whole of Ubisoft. I beat them. I pushed them to number 2 in one of their sports games. Never forgave me for it. Did you reach your drumming goals? Drumeo. Yeah, that's just random. Yes, I did sign up for Drumeo a few years ago. I am still working on my drumming. But mainly it's been useful for composition. Have I watched Idiocracy yet? Yeah, I have. In fact, it's a series, isn't it? It just keeps going. I see it all the time. Don't you? Idiocracy. Just look at the news or Twitter or anything. Yeah. It started to get a bit, they're running out of ideas though, so it's sort of repeating the same old idiocracies. I don't know. It's hard. It's an expression we are trying to expand in the French language worldwide. It means everything: great, bad, difficult, sad, inspiring. Yeah, it's a bit like the Italian coraggio, courage, but it means it in a certain way, which is be brave. It's difficult to translate that sense of coraggio, but you say to somebody it's like a happy sad word, I don't know. Onomatopoeia, lobbying for its use. Well, what is the French word? I'm interested because presumably there is actually a French word that you're referring to. Oh, Gordon, what's your thoughts on organised religion? It's organised belief systems, but they organised religions. Where do they end? You can actually say that Brexit was an organised religion. You could say object-oriented programming is an organised religion. What's the definition of religion? You could say that a definition of religion is something that a group of people believe with then being no real good reason for doing so. But I'm using a fairly broad term for the word religion. I don't know. I think that religion and I'm going to use organised belief systems organised belief systems. Well, the reason I say that is because the problem that I see with religion, I see with also non-religions. Science has this problem too. So there are aspects of science which feel more religious than anything else. It's like science does not admit to the existence of God. Fair enough. But does to the existence of dark energy and dark matter, even though nobody has ever seen dark energy or dark matter. They are inventions which are used to plug a hole in a theory. So it could be that, that's correct, but we have no real basis of knowing for sure. It could be that there's another explanation, and in fact the evidence, as time goes by, the evidence increases that the models that we have for the universe are in fact wrong, or let's say not very good models. So where does a religion end and a science begins? I actually want to do a vlog, whatever, podcast on that particular topic of the subject of, I find very interesting philosophy again, but it's the subject of fundamental truth, right? You see, because distance, time, and speed are three concepts that together make sense. But you can only define any of the three in terms of the other two, which then leaves us with a bit of a conundrum, right? Because it's like if you have A, B, and C, and you can define A in terms of B and C, and B in terms of A and C in terms of A and B, right? Where's the fundamental truth? Time, for example, any definition that you have of time actually requires speed and distance. It turns out if you don't have speed and distance, you can't have time. And it's the same with the others, right? And so what this means is that science, our science that we have, speed, time, and distance are pretty fundamental, right? But it can be argued. I'm just saying it can be argued, right? That is like a religion, in the sense that a religion is an organized belief system, and you could say that science has certain assumptions that it bases everything on. And this is nothing strange. People still often find this strange, but this is well understood in science and expressed by people in science who take it for granted that this is true, that everything that we have in science is based on assumptions at the beginning, axioms, and those axioms have no proof. So it means that the whole of what we have are based on they're not even guesses, they're ways of looking at the world that are useful. And it is useful, that's fine, it's useful, that's not in debate, but it's still an organized belief system. So you tell me where the difference is, because but the scientific method is the difference. And well, yes, that's fine, and I go with that. It's just a part of another model. It's just a set of assumptions that are useful, and you can make technology from it and so on. You can also argue with religions, like the traditional sense. They weren't very good for making technology, right? But they did serve other purpose, like helping people, find their direction in life. It's sort of, or the search for happiness. I'm not saying that there were necessarily good tools for that, but that is in theory. Science is not very good at helping someone find happiness. Maybe religion is a better, that kind of, or maybe not religion, maybe more like spirituality, maybe, or something else. It doesn't really fit into science. It's not really a sciencey thing, But maybe there is some other thing that wouldn't be called science, but called something else that works on different assumptions, which are more useful. Well, if you look at those assumptions, more useful for the aim of people being able to find happiness, right? So you could almost say it's a different math. Say the math of science and the math of happiness. The math of happiness does not have things in it like 1 + 1 is 2. It might have something like 1 + 1 is happiness, in the sense of finding a companion. But, I don't know if you get what I'm saying here. So I'm afraid you've opened up a can of worms with this one. But yeah, I don't really see. What can you do? Yeah. What you can do is be aware of the assumptions that you base all of your model on. Always be aware of the assumptions. Are one of the big mistakes across the board, whether it's a traditional religion or it's science or whatever, is always to forget what the assumptions are. Lose sight of the assumptions. And that is the beginning of the road to hell, paved with good intentions. Anyway, right. Let's move on to the next one. What do you think about Slovakian bot farms? Well, that was not. I don't know anything about them, and that's fine because that wasn't directed at me, so I'll move on. Sony took a lot of ideas from 3DO. In my opinion, Nintendo wouldn't have even offered you a dev kit. Yeah, that's true. And Sony did take things from 3DO. They learned from 3DO's mistakes. So, yeah. Dino has very interesting views. I'm just curious. Yeah, I mean, iconoclast thing. I'm never looking for popularity. But if you think about it, connect this to what I said about me, the way my brain is wired up. It helps me find the road less travelled. So this is actually not so surprising that I don't worry about, oh, is this idea odd or strange? What will people say if I say this? No, it doesn't bother me if it seems to my mind to actually make sense, or I try not to. But I often find I don't actually need to go much further than asking the awkward question, to be honest. And that can make me quite unpopular, just asking the awkward question. You shouldn't ask that. But from the awkward questions comes interesting things, So, yeah, anyway. But that's why I will never have a huge YouTube channel, for example. It's just like people, if you want to find out something about science that may or may not be true, go and check out Veritasium. For example, it's funny, that guy. It's one of many different channels that exist out there, where they're exploring science, and it's. There's a guy called Mold as well, the Mold effect or whatever, with a chain, and if you see that, the chain sort of, take a chain in a big thing like this and you throw it up like that, and it makes, as the chain falls and accelerates, the arch that you get grows in height. Have you seen that one? So he's another one who does that. And there was Veritasium. There was one to do with the fact that a magnet can deflect water, and the explanation that the guy made on it was taken from a paper, and it's just wrong. But there's a paper, and it says this, and so he can do a video about it, and he has a lot of followers, so they now all believe what he said. But there was this other guy that nobody pays attention to, by comparison, much smaller YouTuber, who did some actual in-depth research and shows through experimentation exactly that he's wrong on that one, right? And it just goes to show, back to the question of religion, it's like popular. If you want to be popular, don't try to say anything new. If you want to be popular, say only what people expect to hear. And if you want to be popular, take the road well travelled. That's boring. Anyway, let's see. Android delisting old software is an easy form of curation. I thought it was good. Well, no, the point is that means then that, Android is good for you, is it? But, it's like if it's still selling and they'll delist it, it doesn't make sense. The point is that you don't own the platform. They will delist them if they haven't been updated, even if they are selling. is my understanding. You know? I thought it was something like Forza. Yeah. Yeah, it could also be in Italian. Forza, you mean coraggio. Forza. Like, go ahead. But I think hard, whatever it actually is in French, is, I don't know if Zag said, it's more like, feels more like coraggio. Oh, there is no French word for it. It's just random mongoloid lobbying. Our life is insult comedy. Oh, right, I see. Well, can we use coraggio then? Right. Why Titanic poster? This. I'll take that down. That it says on it, I don't know if you can see, there, it says, what's your biggest risk? I also had it up on there. What's your biggest risk? And that, when I was teaching, I would take that into the game labs and just show, have that there, just to remind the teams to ask themselves the question, what's your biggest risk? You know? Because the story of the Titanic, did you know that the Titanic, so at this point I'm regurgitating stuff that you can find in any number of YouTube channels, so forgive me, but the Titanic set sail on fire. I mean, literally, there was a coal fire, because they used coal for the steam, and it was literally on fire, and they set sail anyway. And that, without doubt, contributed to the problem later, because it's at least a huge distraction, isn't it, for the captain of the ship. So who was it that said, ship it? Terrible. It's an example of how you can have a huge amount of work put into creating something and then find that because of a small thing, even, the whole lot can go. And that's one of the things that's true about game development. You know, shipping a video game is hard because, and you need coraggio, because when you construct a video game, it's as complicated as the Titanic, maybe more complicated than the Titanic. The advantage with the video game is that the bits that make up the complexity are not heavy, whereas the Titanic was physically a huge thing. So obviously you have to figure out how to, deal with the huge mass of things, and you can't easily undo anything, and so on. So there is that. But from the point of view of just the complexity of the design, in other words, with a video game, you're closer to the game and the design being the same thing, whereas with something like that, you have the design and then you need to construct it. Right? But the actual complexity of the design is probably a video game is more complicated than the Titanic. And the problem is that one line of code can completely sink your entire ship, your entire game. Now, it would be difficult, in this case, the Titanic set sail with a fire on board, and it still managed to sail across the ocean to make its unfortunate appointment with an iceberg. That kind of scenario, if it happened with a video game, the video game would not ship at all. Right? In fact, a single character, a single bit, one bit is enough, wrong, is enough to stop the whole thing from loading or running at all. So from that point of view, you know, that's why this is relevant. You can have the greatest, you know, because you don't know if you see that on there. It's because this is also marketing, right? White Star Line, RMS, Titanic, and here it says 45,000 tons, cause numbers, you see, are important. Even back then, 45,000 tons. People go, wow. Unfortunately, the iceberg was 450,000 tons, but anyway, or whatever. And under that it says, the ship of dreams. It was actually the ship of nightmares, but they didn't know. The point, maiden voyage, that's the other side of it as well, that it sank on its maiden voyage. I mean, it's like, I laugh, but it's because, not because it's sad that it sank and the loss of life. I'm not laughing at that. What I'm laughing at is the connection that I make with this to experiences I've had as an engineer. And going, seriously? So, maiden voyage, Southampton to New York. The ship of dreams. So, the problem was, somebody didn't ask, what's our biggest risk? If there had been someone involved in that project looking at what their biggest risks were, perhaps disaster could have been averted. And that's why. So I think there's a lot to be learned from it. You know, like, don't set sail while you're on fire is probably pretty high up in the list. Have you heard about the Intellivision Amico? Family-friendly console that funded game devs but failed to launch. I hadn't been paying attention. It had actually failed to launch. Oh, let me check. That's sad. I mean, it's good that they were funding game developers. Amico game console. It's been abandoned. The trademark has been abandoned. Just seeing what it says. Ah, that's a real shame. I'm glad I didn't get involved in it. Huh. I almost got involved in it. My image is still mirrored. I know it's because I was showing things. Let me flip you back over. Poof. So, yeah, that's a shame. That Amico, it's a shame, but I'm not entirely surprised. It's a hard thing to try and do. You are 15 times smarter than him. Everybody knows it. His audience is... Well, I don't know. Why are you measuring? Again, measuring spoils everything. I don't know that I'm 15 times smarter than anybody else. He does ask some interesting questions. I was really fascinated by the one to do, and to be fair, he does try to push the boundary out. So when he did the one about the speed of light travelling through wires, that one's a very complicated one. It's like if you have a switch and then you go out sort of 1 light second and then come back, and then you have your light bulb here. When you turn on the switch, when does the light turn on? This actually is a hugely complex question. It's a very good question. And he was saying that it should just sort of light up, in the time it takes for the light to travel, the distance, 1 meter. And people have actually reproduced that and so on. So that was actually, and there's the debate still going on, I think. That's fine. The one, by the way, the mold effect with a chain that comes out, I have an explanation for that. That's really simple. It doesn't require, it's so simple that. But then I say that I did have to think about it a bit to come up with a simple answer. I wish I had something to show it. But if you imagine this was filled with a chain and it comes down to the bottom here, right? And then you were to take the end of the chain off and throw it like this, so that it comes down. And what you see is that as the thing speeds up, the arc goes up. But the explanation is simply that as the thing speeds up, you're pulling the chain off the bottom of the floor, giving it an upward velocity that then has to fall back down. It's forming a parabola. And the mathematics of the parabola is that the faster the thing goes, the higher that it has to go, because the speed, right, that it's going down will be the same as the speed that it's going up. So as it accelerates down, it accelerates up, and the faster it gets flung up, the higher it goes. Boom! That's the funny thing. I haven't seen that explanation anywhere. It drives me nuts on that one. I gave up trying to follow it, because we've got him doing his thing, and then there's the other guy got involved. What's it? Electro boom. So electro boom. He's like, he just deliberately gives himself electric shocks, or at least seems to, makes things go bang. It works really well. You can make a living that way if you're the first person to do that. So I'm a little bit suspicious. I wonder, what point. No, I won't say it. All right. Your image is mirrored, right? Titanic was old world technology. Hey Daniel, how you doing? Yeah. Well, it's still pretty amazing that they managed to do it. Coraggio. Dinomation community love. TJ, hey TJ, from Finland. I'm fine, thank you. I hope you're well. That was a really easy question to answer. Twitter is heading into... Oh, Twitter, don't... Twitter. It's not a question. Do you have a question to ask me about Twitter? I'm not going to... I said you can ask me anything. I'm not going to infer the question from what you said. People on the Titanic would be dead today anyway. It's true. It's true. There's a question there as well. I could go off on a tangent on that one, but I'm Ask me anything. I'm not going to answer questions I ask myself. I mean, although I could say I am watching myself, I could count myself as being part of the audience. If I was actually part of the audience, then I would actually be talking to myself, as well as talking to all of you. In such a situation, would I still be, sane? There we are. I asked myself that question, and now I can answer that question. Probably is the answer. Are you working on a new game? No. That was an easy one too. I can't do it. I'm not going to work. Look, I make a promise. I will not work on any independent game development stuff at all, ever, until it can be shown to me that it is worthwhile. If somebody can prove to me that it's worthwhile, I might do it then. But I need to be shown that proof that it is worthwhile, whatever that worthwhileness is. Because I'm done. Otherwise, sorry. We got to it. I got to the end of the chat. Hi there, Daniel. I see that you're there. Oh, I was just about to finish the questions, and a question comes up from Garcia. What is it that I want from being online? I don't want anything from being online. I don't want anything from life. I don't want anything. What is there to want? What does it mean to want? What is there to achieve? Where do I see myself in 5 years? Well, I don't know. Does it matter? Does it matter where I am in 5 years? It's that I used to have plans, but I don't anymore. I literally do not have plans. I think the whole of the the pandemic thing knocked it out of me after everything else as well, and things. I've given up with plans. What's the point of plans? It's just pointless. What I do is I just, like for example, I didn't plan this evening. I didn't say, oh, no. What happened was, I'll tell you what I've done today. Today, actually, I spent most of the day working on my child. Because as I mentioned earlier, since my producer, guy with the studio, is basically not available anymore, I'm left with having to figure out how to ship the music. So I've been having a go. Last night and today, I must have spent about 10 hours on it so far. But so I did that today, and then I had my music fixed, therefore, and I was like, what do I do now? Which I often do. So I just go with what I feel like. So I felt like it. So I went for it. That's it. It's really straightforward. I can recommend this approach. I really can. It's like, what do we need plans for? If you can think of it like a form of agile. I do 1 day sprints. And it's like, that's pretty much it. What motivates me? Nothing motivates me. I don't know. Let me rephrase that. We're going to get to philosophy again. How do we do that? How do we open our hands? Hand shut, hand open. How do I do that? I don't know how I open my hand. I just do. I didn't require any planning. It didn't require, a sprint. It didn't require any motivation. You think about it, The question, what motivates you, is the biggest demotivator ever invented. Don't ask that question. It's a meaningless, unhelpful question. What motivates? What are you going to do with that information? It's like, it's the same as what makes you open your hand. It's like, you know, like, it's like that. You see, just over here, you see there's a metronome, right? So I'm going to get that metronome moving with the power of my mind. Right? Here goes. Oh, I was stuck to it there. There we go. Here we go. There we go. Perfect. It's hitting my arm, and so it's great. Did you know that you can make these things swing by tilting them? Which is kind of interesting. You can... Yeah, but you see, by the power of my mind, because it's just the same. The point with it is that, you know, I open and close my hand with the power of my mind. There's a deep philosophical question with this. It's a well-known problem. I can't remember the name of it now. But where's the boundary between the mind and the action? It's like... You say, well, you cheated. So did I? I used my mind to control my body to do the metronome. So, waiting for the downfall of man. Are you? I think we're all doing that, aren't we? I don't think we're far off now. I think the best thing that we can hope for is a graceful completion of our duties as a species. That would be a great thing. Can we just, you know, if we're going to go, can we all go gracefully? That would be something to aspire to. That would be worthwhile. Don't you think? That is something that is under our control. The rest of it, I don't know. It could be too late to do anything. Could be. I think probably the only thing that really can probably save us is some mechanism that we're unaware of that just kicks in and saves us all. I don't know. But we could, theoretically, we could figure out how to go gracefully. Interesting, I'm just seeing my feed is beginning to die. Ilka. So I don't know if you can hear me. Just go to start recording in case this doesn't come through. So yeah, can you let me know? Can you let me know if I'm still coming through? Having some technical problem.